That all being said, the offensive line was the main focus. It should have been the focus, and it should have been a priority to get something done. The fact that they walk away from the deadline and don't do anything.
Well, they did something. They did one
They
thing.
didn't do anything to help the line, and that's not good enough. That's unacceptable.
Pencils down. The trade deadline has come, and it is gone. And unless something has already been turned in that has not been released, the Houston Texans do absolutely nothing. We made as many trades as the willing-dilling son of a gun Nick Caserio. No trades, Blankers. Is this a disaster for the Houston football team?
It's not a disaster, but it ain't good. I said they had to do something. It's not even so much as, yes, it's related that there were a lot of good teams and a lot of teams in your own conference that were making moves. It was just the fact that this is just unacceptable offensive line play. And I know that people wanted wide receivers, and we said that, you can make multiple moves, but to not make any move, to not do anything is just, I guess they tried out Lyle Collins, the ex-Cowboy offensive lineman this week. I don't know what they're expecting to find, but whether it was for depth or to find someone that might be better than what they have, to do absolutely nothing with all the moves that are taking place, especially amongst good teams, it's extremely disappointing, and I'm bordering on unacceptable.
Okay, but not a disaster?
Well, it's already been a disaster, the way that this offensive line has screwed everything up offensively. I think that it's already been a disaster offensively. The way that you could make it more acceptable was to get help and bring somebody else in. You didn't do that, so now it's just the expectations are very low that it's going to get any better and that you're going to improve as much as a lot of people were expecting you to improve. And you and I talked about yesterday. I don't know how much they could have improved, but they had to do something to try, whether it be guard, center, combination guy that can play both positions, do something to try and make it better personnel-wise, because Kendrick Green obviously can't play dead. So the fact that they've done nothing is extremely disappointing.
Yeah, I'm disappointed with it too. Now, I also had the idea that you're not really making a trade deadline acquisition on the offensive line that is much of a game changer. Like the guy in Chicago had been thrown out. What's his last name? Davis.
Yeah.
His Pro Football Focus is awful. And he was benched by Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was of the impression that you're not really helping your offensive line tremendously at the deadline anyways. So, I did enter trade deadline day with that as my prevailing thought. At the same time, you look around the league and all of these contenders that are making trades, and they're improving their team, whether it's at positions of need or whether it's just adding pieces that are going to help them overall, like the whole Moneyball theme, right? The aggregate. We might not be better here in this huge position of weakness, but let's get better over here and then make our team better just in general. So, yeah, I'm disappointed. It's a dud for sure whenever you look at this trade deadline from a Nick Caserio perspective. He's incredibly aggressive, but hasn't been very aggressive at the deadlines over the years, and this is only his second year with a contending team, but wasn't aggressive last year at the deadline. I was reading that the only time that he's really made a deadline trade, if you don't include Cam Akers, which I don't, was whenever he sold Mark Ingram, whenever they had him in the early years. I think that was the Cully year. So, that's whenever they were sellers. They weren't even buyers then. So, yeah, it's incredibly disappointing. Now, I didn't expect them to add a name that would really move the needle a ton, but if you just take inventory of where the Houston Texans stack up in the AFC, they're certainly second or third tier. You were hopeful that they could make a move today that would help their cause, and they don't. So it is a wet blanket, so to speak, on the NFL trade deadline.
It really is. I mean, I was watching it on a lot of fronts and hoping, hey, there's a guy for depth. There's a guy that maybe could improve you. There's a guy, and not just at guard or center, but looking across the league. And like you said, there were a lot of good teams trying to get better today. There were teams that knew that they had the roster capable of not only getting into the playoffs, but maybe making a little headway, trying to get better so that they could solidify a better chance to go further. And we saw Baltimore already make moves. We know that the Chiefs made multiple moves. We know that the teams, the Bills getting Amari Cooper was another big move. The Steelers making multiple moves today, and you would like to believe that you're a better team than the Steelers. So you look at that and you go, hey, if you want to look at it for what the Joneses are doing, yeah, you're not keeping up with the Joneses. If you want to look at it internally and just look at what you have and what you were trying to and what you're trying to accomplish, I don't think you have enough to accomplish what everybody seems to think is the end goal that gets you to where your season is anything less than a disappointment.
Yeah, we do have some breaking news, though,
Okay.
from Ian Rappaport. Right at the buzzer, the Houston Texans have made a trade. They have made a trade. The Texans are trading Khil Davis to the 49ers in exchange for a 2026 seventh-round pick. So there's your trade, Blankers. There's the splash. There's the splash for the Houston Texans. They're sellers. They're selling Khil Davis. They get a seventh-round pick in 2026. So Will and Dillon, Nick Caserio, he lives up to his name. He lives up to his name as a trader, as somebody who's very aggressive. So there you have it. The Houston Texans are not silent at the trade deadline. They go right to the buzzer. Nick Caserio beats the buzzer by trading for a 2026 seventh-round pick. I wonder if that seventh-round pick can block. You think it can block? You think it can pass protect?
My God. And evidently the Niners are enamored with now ex-Texans linemen more than the Texans were enamored with keeping them. Isn't that their second acquisition from the Texans for the defensive line? I mean, from last year and then
it was
now.
Collins, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you look at it and go, and DJ and I were talking about it on the way out. I mean, for as much as they wanted to upgrade their interior defensive line and Settle and Foley were the guys that, and Edwards were the guys that they settled on. You look at the two guys that they walked away from, and those two guys are pretty damn good and were pretty good for you here. So that all being said, the offensive line was the main focus. It should have been the focus, and it should have been a priority to get something done. The fact that they walk away from the deadline and don't do anything.
Well, they did something. They did one thing.
They didn't do anything to help the line, and that's not good enough. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense to trade Davis. I wonder if this is good news for Danielle Hunter, though. Like, if I try to put the two and two together and read the tea leaves here, like, I know they don't play. Will Anderson. I know they don't play, the same position. Will Anderson, defensive end, Khil Davis, defensive tackle. But there is some similarity there because you have Danico Autry, who can kind of go back and forth. So I wonder if they feel good about Will Anderson's sprained ankle to the fact that they're willing to trade from that defensive tackle depth. Like, it makes me think that he might be healthy as I try to just kind of read the tea leaves. Maybe it's not related at all. Maybe they were just unhappy with Khil Davis for whatever reason. But it kind of gives me the sense, if I'm trying to reach and put something together, that they feel somewhat confident that Will Anderson's not going to miss games. Hopefully, anyways.
Yeah, and I think that maybe also in the fact that when they were doing the rotation on the defensive line, the fact is you didn't expect to get what you've gotten until he got suspended from Mario, and you look at the rest of the guys on the defensive line, and they've been doing they've been doing decently enough that if he wasn't going to get the run and you could get something for him, so be it. I would have liked that seventh-round pick to be turned around and dealt in another deal, or the backup plan when you deal one of them to get someone that would seem to be the going rate, that were a lot of veterans that were on the market that you could have achieved, one or more of the holes that we've seen have been glaring for this team in the last several weeks, and tried to make them better.
Yeah, to be fair, though, there was not an offensive lineman that got traded today. Like, the only one that was traded really at the deadline was the Jacksonville left tackle that went to Minnesota whenever they needed the left tackle, and maybe you didn't need a left tackle. Now, I didn't hate your idea yesterday where, hey, like, we're so bad at pass protection, let's play a bunch of tackles. Yeah. Let's just play pass protection guys and try to protect C.J. Stroud. So Khil Davis is gone. He's a 49er. That's the big trade for Nick Caserio today. 8089, Lyle Collins has to be an upgrade. I'm not sure that he is. Like, he hasn't played football since 2022. Do you realize that? Like, he has not played in an NFL game since 2022. He's bounced around for a couple of teams. I think he was most recently with Buffalo and got let go. He was on their practice squad for a little bit. He hasn't played a game since he played with Cincinnati. Started 15 games with Cincinnati in 2022. Did not play a single game last year.
Sweet.
So, like, I don't know if that's an upgrade. And, like, there's also some thought that he might not sign. Like, he came in, he's still not a Houston Texan, so I don't know if that's, like, automatic that he's going to be on this team. And I certainly don't think it's automatic that he would be somebody who would all of a sudden be, on your starting five. I think the answer is going to be Jared Patterson, whether he's starting at left guard, whether he's starting at center. The problem you have there, you have two options left. You have Jared Patterson in your interior offensive line. It doesn't matter, left guard, center. Right. And then you have the Blake Fisher right tackle, Titus Howard to left guard. Like, that's what you're stuck with for the rest of the year. The trade deadline passed today. Like, they practice squad guys, whatever. Those guys were on the street for a reason. The Texans have two options. Jared Patterson, interior offensive line, which D'Amico already did, but then Jared Patterson played 10 snaps and got himself concussed. and then Blake Fisher to right tackle, Titus Howard to left guard. Those are your two configurations for the offensive line for the rest of the year, unless you're playing, this jag to fill in whenever you have injury.
Yeah, I just think that if you were looking at a guy like Collins, for me, at least he was going to be depth that might be capable of being better than Kendrick Green and what we saw out of the Kendrick Green experiment, because he shouldn't be on any rosters if he's that bad. And try to give you depth that maybe in a few weeks, if he gets right and he gets into shape, that, he could be a guy that maybe could turn into something that gives you an alternative. But for the meantime, that's not going to move anybody's needle to say, yeah, I'm going to take a guy right off the street and I'm going to put him right into the starting five of my offensive line and we're going to be better, because that's not going to happen. So you're right. I think that there were options out there. There wasn't a lot of movement with offensive line except for left tackles. I don't think David Bakhtiari, and who has dealt with injuries his whole career and is completely not what you're looking for positionally, is a guy you should look at, and he's a street free agent. But there's not going to be a street free agent that's going to make your starting five better right now.
Those guys are also tackles.
Yeah.
If you're gonna try to insert some street free agent at tackle, you might as well just play Blake Fisher at tackle. If you're gonna move Titus Howard to left guard because of these street free agents, then just play Blake Fisher at right tackle. So I'm not really mesmerized by these tackles that are out there. 3772, as far as trades are concerned, activity is not necessarily progress, and moving on a player right now because it is expected may hamper future trades because you have left to offer. Look, I get that. Sometimes the best trades that you make are the ones that you don't make. And I'm not a huge advocate for trading future assets. Now, I think the argument here is, are 6th round picks, 7th round picks assets? Nick Caserio, yes, Nick Caserio has drafted well in later rounds. Nick Caserio also is pretty stinking willy-nilly with late-round draft picks. And you could have gotten a lot of players for late-round draft picks. I don't know much about Preston Smith. Packers traded him to Pittsburgh for a 7th-round pick. Mike Williams. Now, 5th-round pick, that might be more than you're willing to give up. Pittsburgh traded a 5th-round pick for Mike Williams. The Marshawn Lattimore trade, probably more than you would be willing to give up. Lattimore in a 5th for a 3rd, 4th, and a 6th. Jonathan Mingo went for way too much. Dallas Desperate traded a 4th-rounder for Jonathan Mingo, maybe the Mingo ate your baby, and in 2005, 7th for a 4th-round pick. Khalil Herbert, though, 7th-round pick. Could he help your football team? Is he a better back than Dare? Is he a better back than J.J. Taylor? I think that's fair to ask. I like Khalil Herbert. Zadarius Smith, he went for a 5th and a 6th. Yes, he can protect, but is that somebody that's going to help your football team? A 5th and a 6th, maybe that's too much for a guy who wouldn't be a starter. Baron Browning went for a 6th. Cam Robinson, who was the tackle that was traded, he went for a 5th-round pick. He is starting left tackle immediately for one of the better teams in the NFC, went for a 5th-round pick. Deontay Johnson, Johnson in a 6th-round pick for a 5th-round pick. Is that something that would have helped your team? Ernest Jones went for a 4th-round pick. That's probably too much. DeAndre Hopkins, who had a huge game yesterday, 5th-round pick. So, how much are we really assigning value to these late-round draft picks? I don't put much value in 6th and 7th rounders, and Nick Caserio in the past hasn't either. He's traded 6th and 7th-round picks and even 5th-round picks for dudes that he's cut that played less than 2 games with the Houston Texans. So I don't think that 6th and 7th rounders have much value, quite frankly.
I'm with you, and that's why I think if you're worried about trying to save your 6th and or 7th round picks, because I had heard that Pittsburgh, before they settled on Williams, was after Thielen, and it was a back and forth between a 7th and a 6th. The 7th and the 6th wouldn't mean as much to me for next season as it would be to add a player that can hold his own in the slot and be better than what you have with Mechie, Hutchinson, and Woods in terms of trying to replace some of the snaps that you were getting out of Diggs. So you have to look at these things with the feedback of also, well, how value is the pick if the guy doesn't make your roster, or he's not going to make you better whenever you take him for the foreseeable future, as opposed to with all the ways that you've gone all in on this season, you're not willing to try to do anything today to try and take that final swing to make your team better so we can see what this team can truly be based on injuries and less than play. That's disappointing to me.
Yeah, not a fun trade deadline for the Texans, which, we talk about how far the gap is between the Texans or how big the gap is between the Texans and the best teams in the AFC. You were hoping that today you could close that gap a little. Doesn't happen. 7-1-5-1 just gave up Davis for a seventh. LO man. Nick cooked Akers for a pick swap. A decent defensive tackle for Peanuts. Casario is a moron. I'm not willing to go that far. I'm disappointed that the Texans didn't close the gap today, but I don't think Casario is a moron. I do think he's a good general manager. 0-1-6-6, typical Texans. So the fans are not happy. They are not pleased, Blankers, with the Texans doing almost nothing at today's NFL trade deadline.
No, it's extremely disappointing, and all you can do is again hold out hope that somehow, some way, internally, they're going to fix this. And as D'Amico always says, there were good reps in there too. Well, we better find more good reps than bad. We better find someone that doesn't have a concussion that can actually try and do at least serviceable work at left guard. And we better hope that the continuity is just all of a sudden night and day when they play the best team in the NFC on Sunday night.
Yeah, what if it's not, though? They're just going to be the team that we kind of think that they are, right?
Yep.
That's just kind of who they are. What's going to make this trade even funnier is that the 49ers win the Super Bowl in 2025. So it makes this 2026 7th-rounder the Mr. Irrelevant pick. That could make it sweeter. Khil Davis for Mr. Irrelevant, maybe?